They're beating my grandma. Please, he's gonna kill her. A barefoot 6-year-old girl, dress torn, lip bleeding, eyes wild with terror, exploded through a diner door and grabbed the leather vest of the biggest, scariest man in the room. 8 bikers, full leather, covered in tattoos. She didn't run to the cops. She didn't scream for the waitress. She chose them. Outside, a violent man was beating her 67-year-old grandmother between 2 pickup trucks in broad daylight. What those 8 men did next didn't just stop an assault. It exposed a murder, destroyed a predator, and started a movement that no one saw coming. Subscribe now, stay until the very end, and comment your city. I want to see how far this story reaches. The chrome bell above the door didn't ring that morning. It screamed. It hit the glass so hard 3 coffee cups rattled on the counter. Donna Whitfield, who'd been waitressing at Red's Roadside Diner for 22 years, nearly dropped a full pot of coffee on her own shoes. The regulars at the front counter, 2 retired truckers and a grain farmer named Bill, all turned at once. But it wasn't the bell that stopped every heartbeat in the room. It was the child. She was 6, maybe younger. Blonde hair matted to her face with sweat and tears. No shoes. The bottom of her dress was ripped from the hem to just above her knee. Her knees were dirty. Her lip was bleeding. Not like she'd been hit, but like she'd fallen face first running too hard. And she was screaming. Not crying, not whimpering, screaming. The kind of sound that doesn't come from fear alone. It comes from watching something no child should ever see. "They're beating my grandma. Please, they're beating my grandma." The whole diner went silent. Forks stopped. Jaws locked. Nobody moved. Nobody except the 8 men in the back booth. They were hard to miss. Always had been. Every Sunday morning for the past 3 years, the same crew rolled into Red's around 8:30. Harleys lined up outside like a steel wall. Leather vests, heavy boots, tattoos crawling up forearms and necks. They laughed loud, they tipped well, and they never, not once, caused trouble. They called themselves the Iron Wolves. The little girl didn't know their name. She didn't know their code. She didn't know that half of them had daughters and granddaughters of their own. She just saw size. She saw strength. And in the mind of a terrified child, strength was the only thing that could stop what was happening outside. She ran past every table, past Donna, past the 2 truckers who were still sitting frozen with their mouths open. She grabbed the leather vest of the biggest man in the booth. His name was Reed Lawson, 44 years old. Brown hair going silver at the temples, former Marine, 2 combat deployments, road captain of the Iron Wolves. He had hands the size of dinner plates and a voice that could quiet a room without raising it. He looked down at the girl. She looked up at him with eyes that were so wide, so desperate, so full of raw terror that something inside Reed cracked open and never closed again. "Please," she whispered, "he's gonna kill her." Reed didn't ask who. He didn't ask where. He didn't ask for details. He stood up. And when Reed stood, every man at that table stood with him. Tiny Jackson, the club's sergeant-at-arms, ironically 6'5" and 260 pounds, was the first one moving toward the door. Behind him came Duke Morales, the club's treasurer, a former corrections officer with a shaved head and a scar across his chin. Then Preacher, the oldest member at 61, white beard, reading glasses still hanging around his neck. Then Coyote, Flip, Hammer, and a prospect named Danny, who was barely 23 and had never seen real violence outside of a bar fight. 8 men, moving as one. Reed knelt down on one knee in front of the girl. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emily." "Emily, where's your grandma right now?" "The parking lot. Behind the trucks. He's hitting her. He won't stop hitting her." Reed put his hand on her shoulder. Gentle, steadier than anything she'd felt in hours. "You stay right here with Donna. Can you do that for me?" Emily nodded. Her chin was trembling so hard her teeth clicked together. Reed looked at Donna. "Don't let her out of your sight." Donna pulled Emily behind the counter and wrapped her arms around her. The girl buried her face in Donna's apron and sobbed. Reed walked toward the door. He didn't run. Running would mean panic, and Reed Lawson did not panic. The parking lot was half gravel, half cracked asphalt. 3 pickup trucks were parked along the side of the building, blocking the view from the road. That's why nobody driving past had seen anything. That's why nobody had called the police. That's why Caleb Turner had chosen this exact spot. Caleb was 38, broad shoulders, thick neck, the kind of man who looked like he'd played football in high school and spent every year since then getting meaner. He had a criminal record that read like a warning label: 2 domestic assault charges, 1 conviction, 3 restraining orders, 2 of which he'd already violated. And right now he had Margaret Parker backed against the bed of a Chevy Silverado, gripping her wrist with one hand and slapping her with the other. Margaret, Maggie, everyone called her, was 67 years old. Silver hair, thin wrists, arthritis in both hands. She weighed maybe 115 pounds soaking wet. But she was standing, still standing, because she had learned a long time ago that falling down in front of a man like Caleb meant you might not get back up. Blood ran from a cut above her left eye. Her blouse was torn at the collar. She was trying to pull free, but Caleb's grip was a vice. "Where is she?" Caleb's voice was a snarl. "Where'd you send her? I have rights, Maggie. I'm her father. You don't get to take my kid from me." "You lost that right when you put your hands on her mother," Maggie said. Her voice shook, but her words didn't. Caleb hit her again. Open palm, hard enough to snap her head sideways. "I'll burn your house down. I'll take Emily myself. You think a piece of paper from some judge is going to stop me?" That's when the gravel crunched behind him. Caleb turned. 8 men stood in a line. Leather, chrome, silence. Reed was in the center. His arms were at his sides. His jaw was set. His eyes locked on Caleb with a focus that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with precision. "Let her go," Reed said. Caleb blinked. Then he laughed. The kind of nervous laugh a man makes when he's been caught, but hasn't figured out he's finished yet. "This ain't your business, biker." "It became our business when your daughter came running inside crying for help." Something shifted in Caleb's face. The laugh died. His grip on Maggie's wrist tightened. She winced. "She's my daughter, not yours, not anybody else's. Mine. And that woman you're hitting is her grandmother. Let go. Now." Tiny stepped forward. Just 1 step. But when a man that size moves, the ground itself seems to notice. Caleb released Maggie's wrist. She stumbled sideways. Duke caught her. She grabbed his arm with both hands and didn't let go. "You all right, ma'am?" Duke asked softly. Maggie nodded, but her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't hold on. Caleb's eyes darted between the men, calculating, measuring, looking for the gap, the way out, the weak point. There wasn't one. "I'm leaving," Caleb said. He took 1 step backward. "No," Reed said, "you're not. You can't hold me here. This is a free country. I'll sue every one of you. You're going to stand right here until the sheriff arrives. That's not a request." Caleb's neck flushed red. His fists balled. Reed saw it, the way the shoulders squared, the way the weight shifted to the balls of his feet. He'd seen that stance 100 times. In Fallujah, in bar parking lots, in men who were about to make the worst decision of their lives. "Don't," Reed said quietly. It wasn't a threat. It was a mercy. Caleb swung anyway. Reed sidestepped the punch like he'd known it was coming 3 seconds before Caleb did. 1 controlled strike, palm heel to the sternum. Not the jaw, not the temple, the sternum. Enough force to drop Caleb to his knees, gasping for air, but not enough to break anything. Because Reed Lawson knew exactly how much violence was necessary, and not 1 ounce more. Caleb hit the gravel on both knees. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Tiny stepped behind him and put 1 massive hand on his shoulder. Stay down, brother. Trust me, stay down. Caleb stayed down. Hammer already had his phone out. Sheriff's Department? Yeah, we're at Red's roadside on Route 66. You're going to want to get here quick. We've got a man who just assaulted an elderly woman in the parking lot. No, he ain't going anywhere. I promise you that. Inside the diner, Donna held Emily tighter as the girl trembled against her. Is my grandma okay? Emily kept asking. Is she okay? Is she okay? She's okay, baby, Donna whispered. Those men are taking care of it. Bill, the grain farmer, got up from his stool and walked to the window. He watched the 8 bikers standing in a disciplined circle around a kneeling man, and he shook his head slowly. I'll be damned, he muttered. Sheriff Daniel Harper arrived in 7 minutes. He knew the Iron Wolves. He'd ridden alongside them in 2 Veterans Day parades and a charity run for the Children's Hospital last Christmas. He trusted Reed Lawson more than half the deputies in his own department. Harper stepped out of his cruiser and surveyed the scene. Caleb was still on his knees. Maggie was sitting on the tailgate of a truck with Duke standing beside her, holding a first aid kit Donna had brought out from inside. Reed, Harper said. Sheriff, what happened? His daughter ran into the diner, said he was beating her grandmother. We came outside, found him hitting Mrs. Parker. I put him down. He's been right there ever since. Harper looked at Caleb. Caleb Turner, I should have known. You got active restraining orders on this man, Sheriff. 3 of them. I'm aware. Then how's he walking around free enough to do this? Harper didn't answer right away. He crouched down in front of Caleb. Caleb, you understand you're under arrest? I want a lawyer. You'll get one. Stand up. The deputies cuffed Caleb and put him in the back of the cruiser. He stared out the window at Reed the entire time. Not with fear, with rage. The kind of rage that doesn't cool down in a holding cell. The kind that festers. Reed saw it, and he filed it away. Maggie was shaking when Emily finally came outside. The girl broke free from Donna's hand and sprinted across the gravel. She threw herself into her grandmother's arms, so hard Maggie nearly fell off the tailgate. Grandma, Grandma, I thought he was gonna... Shh, I'm right here, baby. I'm right here. They held each other. Maggie rocked Emily the way she probably had when Emily was an infant. Back and forth, like the motion itself could erase everything that had happened. Reed stood 10 feet away. He watched them, and something in his chest tightened that he hadn't felt since his own daughter had called him crying from a parking lot in Fort Worth 6 years ago, begging him to come get her because her boyfriend had locked her out of the car at 2 in the morning. He'd driven 400 miles that night without stopping. Some calls you don't ignore. Preacher walked up beside him. You okay, brother? No, Reed said honestly. Me neither. He's gonna make bail, Preacher. You know he will. Judge Whitmore's been soft on domestic since his own nephew caught a charge last year. Caleb will be out in 72 hours. Probably. And then what? He comes back. He always comes back. Men like him don't stop. So what are you saying? Reed looked at Emily. She was still clinging to Maggie like if she let go, the whole world would collapse. I'm saying that little girl chose us. She ran past every adult in that diner and grabbed my vest. She didn't go to the cops. She didn't call 911. She came to us. Reed, I'm not walking away from this. Preacher was quiet for a long moment. Then he put his hand on Reed's shoulder. Then neither am I. The sheriff took statements from everyone. Maggie's injuries were documented. The cut above her eye needed 4 stitches, bruises on her wrists, a sprained finger on her left hand. Emily was checked by the paramedic and cleared physically, but the EMT pulled Donna aside and said quietly, "That child needs to talk to someone. She's in shock." Donna nodded. "I know." As the cruiser pulled away with Caleb inside, Harper walked back to Reed. "I appreciate what you did here, but I need you to let the system handle this from here on out." Reed looked at him. "With all due respect, Sheriff, the system had 3 restraining orders on that man, and he was still beating a 67-year-old woman in a parking lot on a Sunday morning. Harper's jaw tightened. That's fair. I'm not trying to make your job harder, but I'm also not going to pretend the system's been working for this family. What are you planning? Nothing illegal. Everything visible. We're going to make sure that woman and that child are safe. That's it. Harper studied him for a long moment. He'd known Reed for 5 years. Never once had the man lied to him. Never once had the club caused a problem he couldn't explain. And in a town where half the badge-carrying officers were too young or too lazy to show up on time, having 8 disciplined, veteran-heavy bikers watching over a vulnerable family wasn't the worst thing in the world. Keep me informed, Harper said finally. Always. 2 hours later, the Iron Wolves held an emergency church, their term for a full membership vote. They met in the back room of Tiny's auto shop on Oak Street, same place they'd met every month for 8 years. The rooms smelled like motor oil and old leather. Reed stood at the front. You all saw what happened this morning. Caleb Turner has been terrorizing Margaret Parker and her granddaughter Emily for months. Stalking, threats, violated 3 protective orders. Today he put his hands on a 67-year-old woman in broad daylight. He paused. His 6-year-old daughter ran into our diner and begged us for help. She looked at me like I was the last safe thing in her world. I'm not going to lie to you. That broke something in me. Duke leaned forward. What exactly are we talking about here, Reed? A one-time thing or something bigger? Bigger. Caleb's going to make bail, probably within 3 days. When he does, he'll come back. That's who he is. Maggie and Emily need real protection, not a piece of paper, not a patrol car driving by once a night. Real protection. Flip raised his hand. He was the club's youngest full member at 31. I hear you, brother, but we're talking about round-the-clock surveillance, escorts, court appearances. That's time. That's money. Some of us got day jobs. I know what I'm asking. You asking us to adopt this family? I'm asking us to be who we say we are. The room went quiet. Coyote, real name Carlos Reyes, former Army medic, father of 4, spoke from the corner. My youngest is 7. When I heard that girl screaming this morning, all I could see was my Sophia running for help. What if nobody stood up? What if she ran into a room full of people and every single one of them looked away? He shook his head. I can't live in that world. I won't. Danny, the prospect, raised his hand nervously. I know I don't have a vote yet, but I need to say something. Reed nodded. I grew up in a house like Emily's. My old man used to beat my mom every Friday night like it was his religion. When I was 8, I ran next door and begged the neighbor to help. You know what he said? That's a family matter, son. Close the door in my face. Danny's voice cracked. I'm standing here today because eventually somebody, a teacher, a coach, a stranger at a gas station, finally didn't look the other way. If we don't do this, we're that neighbor. And I'd rather die than be that neighbor. Nobody spoke for 10 seconds. Preacher stood up slowly. I've been riding with this club for 19 years. We've done charity runs, toy drives, food banks. That's good work, important work. But this is different. This is a child looking into our eyes and saying, I chose you. If we say no, we don't deserve these patches. Reed looked around the room. Every face, every pair of eyes. All in favor. 8 hands went up. Every single one. Unanimous. We're in. Tiny cracked his knuckles. So, what's the plan? First, we talk to Maggie. She needs to know we're not trying to take over her life. This only works if she trusts us. Second, we find her a safer place to stay. That house Caleb knows about is a liability. Third, we set up a rotation. 2 brothers at her location at all times. 4-hour shifts. Fourth, we connect her with legal aid. She needs a real lawyer, not a court-appointed kid who's never tried a domestic case. And when Caleb gets out, Hammer asked. Reed's eyes went hard. We'll be there, visible, legal, and unmovable. He won't get within 200 yards of that woman or that child without looking at a wall of leather and chrome. And if he tries anyway, then we call the sheriff and let the cameras we install do the talking. Duke nodded. Smart. No vigilante garbage. Everything documented. Everything clean. That's exactly right. We protect this family the way it should have been done from the start. And we do it so well that when this goes to court, there won't be a single question about Caleb Turner's intent or his danger. The meeting ended at 4:30. By 6, Reed was sitting on Maggie Parker's front porch with a cup of tea he hadn't asked for, but she'd insisted on making. Emily was asleep on the couch inside, curled up with a stuffed rabbit that had one ear missing. Maggie sat across from Reed in a rocking chair that creaked with every motion. Her left eye was swollen shut. The stitches above it looked angry and fresh. "I've lived in this town for 41 years, she said quietly. Raised my daughter here, buried my husband here, watched my daughter die on a highway 15 miles from here. And now I'm raising her child because the man who helped create her turned out to be a monster." She rocked slowly. "I've called the police 11 times in the past year. 11. You know how many times it resulted in Caleb spending more than a night in jail?" "0, Reed said. 0. "Mrs. Parker." Maggie, I'm not here to tell you we can fix the system. I'm here to tell you that while we work within the system, we'll make sure you and Emily are safe." "Why? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything." Reed set his tea down. He leaned forward. His elbows rested on his knees and his hands hung between them. "Because your granddaughter ran into a room full of strangers and asked for help. That's the bravest thing I've ever seen a human being do. And I've been to war." Maggie's bottom lip trembled. "She's all I have. If something happens to me, she goes into the system. Foster care, group homes. Caleb's already got family members lined up to petition for custody. His mother, his sister, people who've never once protected that child. Nothing's going to happen to you." "You can't promise that." "No, but I can promise that every single member of my club will be standing between Caleb Turner and this family for as long as it takes." A tear ran down Maggie's bruised cheek. "I don't trust easily, Reed. Life taught me that. But that little girl in there, she trusted you before she even knew your name. And she's the smartest person I've ever met. She gets that from you." Maggie almost smiled. Almost. "Okay," she said. "Tell me the plan." Reed told her. Every detail. The safe relocation, the security cameras, the escort rotations, the legal aid, the court advocacy, all of it. When he finished, Maggie was quiet for a long time. "My daughter used to say that the world is full of people who look strong but aren't, and people who don't look strong but are." She looked at Reed directly. "I think she would have liked you." Reed swallowed hard. "I think I would have liked her too." He stood up, adjusted his vest, looked through the screen door at Emily sleeping on the couch. "We start tomorrow. Tiny and Coyote will take the first shift. You'll have my number, Sheriff Harper's number, and a direct line to the club's emergency phone that someone answers 24/7. "Reed?" He turned. "She hasn't slept through the night in 4 months. Every sound, every car door, she wakes up screaming, and every time she asks me the same thing." "What's that?" Maggie's voice broke. "Is he here?" Reed felt the weight of those 2 words settle onto his shoulders like a loaded vest. He looked at Maggie, then at the sleeping child inside. "Not anymore," he said, and he walked into the dark toward his motorcycle, already knowing in his bones that this was only the beginning. Reed didn't sleep that night. He sat on the edge of his bed in the dark, boots still on, phone face up on the mattress beside him. Every time a car passed outside, his jaw tightened. Every time his phone buzzed, his hand moved before his brain did. At 5:14 a.m., his phone rang. Not a text, a call. It was Maggie. "He called me," her voice was barely a whisper, "from the jail. He called me collect and I answered because I didn't recognize the number." Reed was already standing. "What did he say?" He said when he gets out, he's taking Emily. He said no biker trash is going to stop him. He said he knows people. He said, her breath hitched. He said he knows where my sister lives in Arkansas. Did you record it? I didn't know how. I just froze. I stood there holding the phone like an idiot and I couldn't move. You're not an idiot, Maggie. You're a woman who's been terrorized for years. That's a normal reaction. Normal doesn't help me in court. Reed grabbed his keys. I'm sending Coyote and Tiny over right now. They'll be there in 15 minutes. Don't answer any more calls you don't recognize. I'm going to talk to Sheriff Harper first thing this morning about getting that jail call recorded. Reed, there's something else. He stopped. Emily heard me on the phone. She was standing in the hallway. I didn't know she was there. She heard everything. How is she? She's sitting in the bathtub with her rabbit. She won't come out. She says the bathtub is the only place he can't find her. Reed closed his eyes. His free hand gripped the edge of the dresser so hard, his knuckles turned white. 15 minutes, Maggie. Hold on. He called Coyote first, then Tiny. Then he called Sheriff Harper's personal cell, the one Harper had given him 3 years ago after they'd worked together on a missing teenager case that ended with the Iron Wolves finding the kid at a truck stop 40 miles out of town before law enforcement even finished their shift briefing. Harper picked up on the second ring. This better be good, Reed. Caleb Turner made a threatening phone call to Margaret Parker from your jail at approximately 5 a.m. He threatened to take Emily. He threatened to go after Maggie's sister in Arkansas. That's witness intimidation, interstate threats, and a violation of every active protective order. Harper was quiet for 3 seconds. I'll pull the recording. All jail calls are logged. I need that recording preserved, Sheriff. Not filed, not logged and forgotten. Preserved. Because his lawyer's going to try to get him bail at arraignment, and that recording is the difference between Caleb walking the streets and Caleb sitting in a cell where he belongs. I hear you. Do you? Because 11 times, Sheriff. Maggie's called your department 11 times, and every single time the system chewed it up and spit it out like it was nothing. That's not all on me, Reed. I'm not saying it is. I'm saying it ends now. Harper exhaled. Give me 2 hours. I'll have the recording pulled and I'll brief the DA personally. Thank you. Reed hung up. He stood in his dark bedroom for 10 seconds, breathing. Then he called Duke. I need you to find me the best domestic violence attorney within 200 miles. Not the cheapest, not the most convenient, the best. Someone who's gone to war for families like this and won. Duke didn't ask why. Give me until noon. By 8 o'clock, Coyote and Tiny were parked outside Maggie's house. Coyote, real name Carlos Reyes, the former Army medic, had brought a bag of breakfast tacos from Maria's on 5th Street because his wife said you never show up to someone's door in crisis without food. Emily was still in the bathtub when Coyote knocked. Maggie opened the door looking like she'd aged 10 years overnight. The bruise around her left eye had deepened to purple-black. She was holding a coffee cup with both hands, and both hands were trembling. He's outside? She asked. Tiny's in the truck out front. I'm here inside if you need me. Nobody's getting close, Maggie. My granddaughter's in the bathroom. She won't eat. She won't talk. She's just holding that rabbit and staring at the wall. Coyote set the tacos on the kitchen counter. Can I try? Maggie hesitated. Then she nodded. Coyote walked down the hall. The bathroom door was open 3 inches. He could see Emily sitting in the empty tub, knees pulled to her chest, the one-eared rabbit clutched against her heart. He didn't go in. He sat down on the hallway floor with his back against the wall, right next to the door crack. Hey, Emily. My name's Carlos, but everybody calls me Coyote. No response. I brought breakfast tacos. My wife makes the best ones in town, but don't tell her I said that because she'll just make me eat more of them. Nothing. I got a daughter about your age, Sophia. She's 7. She's got this stuffed elephant named Peanut that she takes everywhere. One time, Peanut fell out the car window on the highway. I drove 4 miles back to find him in a ditch. My wife thought I was crazy. Sophia thought I was a hero. Silence. Then very quietly, "Did you find him?" Covered in mud and missing one eye, Sophia said it gave him character. Another pause. Then the bathroom door opened 2 more inches. "What's your rabbit's name?" Coyote asked. "Captain." "Captain? That's a strong name. How'd he lose his ear?" "My mom gave him to me before she went to heaven. His ear came off when I was little because I held him too tight. Grandma sewed it back, but it fell off again." Coyote's throat tightened. "Sounds like Captain's been through a lot." "He protects me." "Yeah? How does he do that?" "When I hold him, the bad dreams can't get all the way in. They try, but Captain blocks them." Coyote had to take a breath before he spoke again. He'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan. He'd held dying men in the back of a Humvee. He'd been shot at, blown up, and medevaced. None of it hit as hard as a 6-year-old girl explaining how a stuffed rabbit was her only line of defense against nightmares. "That sounds like a pretty brave captain to me." The door opened all the way. Emily looked at him with those enormous eyes, the same desperate, searching eyes that had locked onto Reed in the diner. "Are you one of the motorcycle men?" "I am. Are you going to make sure he doesn't come back?" "That's exactly what I'm going to do." "Promise?" "Promise." Emily stared at him for a long moment. Then she climbed out of the tub, walked past him into the kitchen, sat down at the table, and ate a breakfast taco without saying another word. Maggie stood at the counter watching, tears running silently into her coffee. By noon, Duke had found the attorney. Her name was Linda Faye Robertson, 53 years old, based out of Oklahoma City. She'd been a domestic violence prosecutor for 12 years before switching to family law. She'd won custody cases against men with more money, more power, and more connections than Caleb Turner could ever dream of having. And she'd done it because she had her own story. A story she never talked about publicly, but that everyone in the legal community knew. That she'd spent 3 years married to a man who broke her collarbone twice before she finally got out. Duke called Reed. "Found her. She's not cheap." "How much?" $15,000 retainer. "But Reed, she doesn't lose. Not these cases. Not ever." "Set up the meeting." "There's something else. She asked me one question before she agreed to even consider it." "What?" "She asked if the child was safe right now. When I told her about the Iron Wolves protection detail, she went quiet for about 10 seconds and then said, 'I'll clear my schedule.'" The next morning, Linda Faye Robertson drove 4 hours to sit at Maggie Parker's kitchen table. She wore no jewelry, no makeup. Her handshake was firm and her eyes missed nothing. She listened to Maggie's story for 45 minutes without interrupting once. She took notes in a leather-bound notebook with handwriting so small and precise it looked like a code. When Maggie finished, Linda asked Emily to go watch television in the other room. Then she looked at Maggie and said something that changed everything. "Maggie, I need to ask you a question that's going to hurt, but I need the truth." "Okay. Was your daughter Emily's mother? Was she afraid of Caleb before she died?" Maggie's face crumpled. "Yes." "Did she ever tell you she wanted to leave him?" "She tried. 3 times. He found her every time." "Was the car accident that killed her ever investigated as anything other than an accident?" The kitchen went dead silent. Maggie's hand went to her mouth. Her eyes widened. Something ancient and terrible surfaced behind them. A question she'd been asking herself for 4 years, but had never said out loud. "The police said she lost control on a wet road. Single vehicle. No witnesses." "But you don't believe that." "My daughter drove that road every day of her life, rain or shine. She knew every curve, every pothole. She could drive it blindfolded." Linda wrote something in her notebook. Then she looked up. "I'm going to request the accident report, the vehicle inspection, and any mechanical analysis that was done. If there's something there, we'll find it." Maggie's hands were shaking so badly she had to put them flat on the table to stop them. "Are you telling me he killed my daughter?" I'm telling you I'm going to find out. Reed was standing in the doorway. He'd heard every word. His face hadn't moved, but behind his eyes, something had caught fire that would not go out. The arraignment was set for Thursday. Caleb's attorney, a fast-talking man named Martin Kessler, who'd made a career out of getting dangerous men back on the street, argued for bail. He called Caleb a concerned father, a man under stress, a man who'd simply lost his temper in a difficult custody situation. Linda Faye Robertson stood up and played the jail call recording. Caleb's voice filled the courtroom. Every threat, every word, the promise to take Emily, the reference to Maggie's sister in Arkansas, the way he laughed when he said no biker trash was going to stop him. Judge Patricia Moreno, 61 years old, grandmother of 5, known for a steel backbone and zero tolerance for men who hit women, listened to the entire recording without blinking. Bail is denied, Kessler objected. Moreno didn't even look at him. Your client made explicit threats from custody against the victim and a minor child. He referenced targeting a family member in another state, which elevates this to potential federal jurisdiction. He has violated 3 prior protective orders. Bail is denied, Mr. Kessler. Your client is remanded until trial. Caleb exploded. He stood up so fast his chair flew backward and hit the gallery railing. This is garbage. She's my kid. You can't keep me from my kid. 2 bailiffs grabbed him. He fought. It took 4 people to get him out of the courtroom. Emily wasn't there. Reed had made sure of that. But Maggie was. She sat in the front row beside Linda, hands folded in her lap, watching the man who'd terrorized her for years finally lose control in front of someone who could do something about it. As the deputies dragged Caleb through the side door, he locked eyes with Maggie. "This isn't over," he screamed. "You hear me, Maggie? This isn't over." Maggie didn't flinch. She held his gaze until the door closed behind him. Then she exhaled for what felt like the first time in 4 years. Outside the courthouse, Reed met her on the steps. She looked up at him with eyes that were red but dry. He said, "It's not over." "He's right," Reed said. "It's not. But the difference now is he's saying it from behind bars, and we're standing out here in the sun." Linda joined them. "Bail denial is a huge win, but I need to prepare you both. His lawyer will appeal. And Caleb's mother has already filed for emergency custody of Emily." Maggie went white. "What?" "Patricia Turner. She filed the petition this morning. She's claiming you're unfit due to age, health, and now, the fact that you've aligned yourself with a motorcycle club she's characterizing as a criminal organization." "That's insane. These men saved my life." "I know, and we'll prove it. But the court doesn't know what I know yet. Right now, a judge is going to see a 67-year-old woman with injuries, police reports full of chaos, and an association with men who ride Harleys and wear leather vests. I need you to understand that perception is a battlefield, and Caleb's family has already started fighting on it." Reed's jaw worked. "What do you need from us?" "Documentation. Every interaction, every shift log, every communication with Sheriff Harper. I need to build a record that shows the Iron Wolves as a civilian protection organization acting in coordination with law enforcement, not vigilantes, not a gang, a community safety net." "We can do that." "I need something else." Linda looked at Reed directly. "I need your military record, your service history, your community involvement, charity work, everything." "Why?" "Because when Caleb's lawyer calls you a biker gang leader in front of a family court judge, I want to stand up and call you a decorated Marine, a Veterans Day parade organizer, a children's hospital charity rider, and a man who has never once been arrested. I want the judge to look at you and see exactly what Emily Parker saw when she ran into that diner. A man worth running to." Reed didn't say anything for a moment, then he nodded once. "You'll have it by tomorrow." That night, Coyote sat in the truck outside Maggie's house while Danny took the inside shift. It was quiet. The street was dark. A dog barked 3 houses down and then stopped. At 11:47 p.m., Danny called Reed. "We got a problem. Talk to me." A woman just showed up at the front door, says she's Caleb's mother, Patricia Turner. She's demanding to see Emily. Did Maggie let her in? No, Maggie told her to leave. Patricia started screaming on the porch about grandparents' rights. She's got her phone out. She's recording everything. Is she still there? Standing on the sidewalk now. She's calling someone. Do not engage. Do not speak to her. Let Maggie handle it and make sure our guys are visible, but silent. She wants footage of bikers confronting a grandmother. Don't give it to her. Understood. And Danny? Yeah? Start recording from our side. Everything. Every word she says. Every move she makes. If she's building a case, we build a better one. 20 minutes later, a car pulled up. Martin Kessler, Caleb's attorney, stepped out. He walked up to Maggie's door and knocked. Maggie opened it. "Mrs. Parker, I'm here to inform you that my client's mother, Patricia Turner, has filed for emergency visitation rights. You are required by law to allow supervised access to the child within 48 hours. I'm required by common sense to protect my granddaughter from the family of the man who beat me unconscious in a parking lot. That's a matter for the courts to decide." "Then let the courts decide. Get off my porch." Kessler smiled, the kind of smile that has nothing to do with warmth and everything to do with leverage. "Mrs. Parker, I would strongly advise you to cooperate. The optics of a grandmother surrounded by a biker gang, refusing access to the child's paternal family, that's not a good look for custody proceedings." From the hallway behind Maggie, Danny's voice came steady and clear. "For the record, this conversation is being recorded. You're on private property without invitation. You've been asked to leave." Kessler's smile faded. He looked past Maggie at the young man in the leather vest holding up a phone. "This isn't over," Kessler said. "People keep saying that," Danny replied, "and yet here we are." Kessler turned and walked back to his car. Patricia Turner was already inside, watching through the window. Danny closed the door. Maggie was leaning against the wall, shaking. "How many times?" she whispered. "How many times do I have to fight these people?" "As many as it takes," Danny said quietly, "but you're not fighting alone anymore." In the living room, Emily was sitting on the couch with Captain in her lap. She hadn't moved. She hadn't cried. She just listened to everything through the thin walls of the old house. "Grandma?" she called out. Maggie wiped her face and went to her. "Yes, baby?" "That lady on the porch, was that his mom?" Maggie sat down beside her. "Yes." "She wants to take me to him?" "Nobody is taking you anywhere." Emily was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that Maggie would repeat in courtrooms, in interviews, and in speeches for the rest of her life. "Grandma, I don't want to go with people who love him more than they love me." Maggie pulled her close and held her so tight that Captain's remaining ear pressed flat between them. 3 blocks away, Reed sat on his bike in the dark, engine off, phone in his hand. Danny's recording was already forwarded. Linda Faye Robertson was already awake and reviewing it. The war wasn't coming. It was already here. The war was already here, and it was about to get worse. Reed forwarded Danny's recording to Linda Faye Robertson at 11:52 p.m. By midnight, Linda had already drafted an emergency motion to block Patricia Turner's visitation petition. By 1 in the morning, she'd called Reed back. The recording is gold. Kessler showing up at Maggie's door uninvited, at night, with his client's mother. That's intimidation. A family court judge will see right through it. What about the custody petition? Patricia filed under grandparents' rights statutes. She's arguing that Emily has a constitutional right to a relationship with her paternal family. It's a legitimate legal avenue, Reed. We can't just wave it away. This woman raised Caleb. She watched him become what he is. She never once intervened. I know that. You know that. But the court doesn't know that yet. We need witnesses. People who can testify to Patricia's knowledge of Caleb's behavior, and her failure to act. I'll find them. Reed hung up and stared at the ceiling. 2 a.m. His body ached from 4 months of sleeping in trucks and sitting through shifts. His back hadn't been right since Fallujah, and the cold nights weren't helping. But sleep wasn't coming. Not tonight. He picked up his phone and called Duke. I need you to dig into Patricia Turner. Everything. Neighbors, co-workers, church members, anyone who might have seen or heard how Caleb grew up in that house. If she knew what her son was doing to Sarah and did nothing, someone out there can prove it. Duke was quiet for a second. You think she enabled him? I think monsters don't grow in a vacuum. Somebody taught that man that women were things you hit, and I want to know who. Duke found the first witness in 2 days. Her name was Ruth Adkins, 70 years old. She'd lived next door to the Turner family for 31 years. She'd watched Caleb grow up. She'd watched his father, Dale Turner, beat Patricia in the front yard every Saturday night after the bars closed. She'd called the police twice. Both times Patricia refused to press charges. Both times young Caleb stood on the porch watching. Ruth sat across from Linda at her kitchen table and spoke without hesitation. That boy learned violence the way other children learn their ABCs. Dale hit Patricia, Patricia hit Caleb, Caleb hit everything that moved. Dogs, kids at school, his first girlfriend in 10th grade. I saw him shove her into a mailbox. When I told Patricia, you know what she said? Boys will be boys. That's what she said. Boys will be boys. Linda wrote it all down. Would you be willing to testify to this in court? Honey, I've been waiting 20 years for someone to ask me that question. The second witness found them. A woman named Karen Briggs called Linda's office after seeing a brief news mention of the case. Karen had been Caleb's girlfriend in college. They dated for 8 months. He'd broken her wrist, her phone, and her spirit, in that order. I went to Patricia for help, Karen told Linda over the phone, her voice still carrying the tremor of a wound that hadn't fully healed after 15 years. I drove to her house and showed her my wrist in a cast and told her what Caleb did. She looked at me and said, "You must have provoked him. My son doesn't just hit people for no reason." Linda closed her eyes. Karen, would you testify? I'll do more than testify. I'll stand in that courtroom and make sure every person on that jury understands exactly what kind of family is trying to get custody of that little girl. Reed brought both names to the next Iron Wolves meeting. The room was quiet as he laid it out. Patricia Turner isn't just filing for custody, she's running a campaign. Kessler's strategy is to paint Maggie as unstable, elderly, injured, associated with what they're calling a biker gang. They want to make us the story instead of Caleb. Flip leaned forward. So what do? We don't play defense. We let Linda handle the legal offensive. Ruth Adkins and Karen Briggs testified to the Turner family pattern. We document everything we've done, every shift log, every escort, every communication with Sheriff Harper. And we do something else. He looked around the room. We go public. Hammer shook his head. Public? Reed, half the town already thinks we're running some kind of vigilante operation. Then we change that. We invite the press. We show them the shift schedules, the charity work, the coordination with law enforcement. We let Maggie tell her story, not through a lawyer, through her own voice. Coyote nodded slowly. The narrative's been controlled by Kessler so far. He's the one leaking to the papers. We've been silent. Exactly, and silence lets other people fill in the blanks. It's time to fill them in ourselves. Maggie agreed the same afternoon. She didn't hesitate. I spent 4 years being quiet. Quiet when Caleb threatened me. Quiet when the police did nothing. Quiet when my daughter died and something in my gut screamed it wasn't an accident. I'm done being quiet. The story broke in the county paper first, not the hit piece Kessler had planted, but a real story. The reporter, a woman named Janelle Cross, who'd covered domestic violence for 11 years, spent 2 days with Maggie, with Reed, with Sheriff Harper, and with Donna Whitfield. She reviewed the shift logs. She verified the charity records. She spoke to Dr. Nakamura about the therapeutic impact of community-based protection on child trauma survivors. The headline ran on a Wednesday. When a child asked strangers for help, a motorcycle club became a family's shield. Kessler's phone started ringing, not with support, with cancellations. Two of his other clients dropped him within a week. A local bar association review board opened an inquiry into his nighttime visit to Maggie's home. Patricia Turner's attorney, a different lawyer because Kessler was now drowning in his own problems, filed a revised custody petition. This one was softer, less aggressive. It asked for supervised visitation rather than full custody. Linda tore it apart anyway. In a closed family court hearing, Linda presented Ruth Adkins' testimony, Karen Briggs' testimony, and the documented history of the Turner family's pattern of enabling violence. She showed the court that Patricia had known about Caleb's behavior for decades and had done nothing, worse than nothing. She defended it, excused it, perpetuated it. The judge, not Moreno this time, but a family court judge named David Chen, who'd spent 20 years handling custody disputes, listened for 3 hours. Then he ruled. The petition for visitation by Patricia Turner is denied. This court finds that the petitioner has demonstrated a sustained pattern of enabling and excusing domestic violence. Granting visitation would place the minor child in an environment where such behavior is normalized and defended. The welfare of the child is this court's sole concern, and this court is not satisfied that the petitioner can provide a safe, emotional environment. Patricia Turner stood up in the gallery. "That's my granddaughter. You can't keep me from her." Judge Chen looked at her calmly. "Ma'am, you kept yourself from her. Every time you looked the other way while your son hurt the people around him, you made this choice. I'm simply recognizing it." Patricia's lawyer pulled her out of the courtroom. She was sobbing, loud, heaving sobs that echoed down the hallway. Reed heard them from outside the courtroom doors. He felt nothing for her. He'd used up all his empathy on the people who deserved it. That night, Maggie sat on her apartment couch with Emily asleep beside her. Captain was tucked under Emily's chin. The television was off. The apartment was quiet. The good kind of quiet. The kind that doesn't hold fear inside it. Reed called to check in. He did this every night, 9:30, without fail. "How is she?" "She ate 2 helpings of mac and cheese and told me a joke about a penguin. I can't remember the punchline, but she laughed so hard, milk came out of her nose." Reed smiled. Actually smiled. The first real one in weeks. "That's progress." "Reed, there's something I need to say to you, and I need you to just listen." "Okay." "When Sarah died, I thought my life was over. I thought the best I could hope for was to survive long enough to get Emily to 18. That was it. Survive. Keep my head down. Don't make noise. Don't draw attention. Just hold on." She paused. "I was wrong. Surviving isn't living. And what you and your men gave me, what you gave Emily, it wasn't just protection. It was permission. Permission to fight back. Permission to be angry. Permission to demand that the world treat us like we matter. You always mattered, Maggie. I know that now. I didn't know it 6 months ago. 6 months ago, I was a 67-year-old woman getting hit in a parking lot and thinking, well, this is just how it is. Do you understand how terrifying that is? Not the hitting, the acceptance. The part of your brain that says, this is normal. This is what you deserve. Reed gripped the phone tighter. I understand. I know you do. That's why I trust you. Because you don't pretend it's simple. You don't say, just leave. You don't say, why didn't you fight back? You just show up. That's all any of us did. No, you did more. You showed Emily that men can be safe, that strength doesn't have to mean violence, that someone can be big and loud and covered in leather and still be the gentlest person in the room. Do you know what she said to Dr. Nakamura last week? What? She said, Reed is strong like a wall, But walls don't hit you. Walls just keep the bad things out. Reed had to put the phone down for a second. He pressed his palm against his forehead and breathed. "Still there?" Maggie asked. "Still here." "Good, because I'm not done. I've been thinking about what Linda said, about Sarah's accident, about the brake lines." Reed's chest tightened. "Maggie, that investigation is ongoing. We don't have conclusions yet." "I don't need conclusions. I need you to hear what I already know. My daughter was leaving Caleb the day she died. She was driving to my house with Emily in the car. The only reason Emily survived is because Sarah's last act on earth was to shield her daughter with her own body when the car went off the road." Her voice cracked but didn't break. "Emily doesn't remember the crash. The doctors say that's normal for a child that young. But she remembers her mother singing. She remembers 'You Are My Sunshine.' She remembers the song stopping." Silence. "If Caleb did this, and I believe in my bones that he did, then my daughter's last breath was spent protecting her child. And that child grew up and ran into a diner and found you. Sarah's courage didn't die on that highway, Reed. It lived. It ran barefoot across a parking lot and grabbed a stranger's vest and said, 'Help my grandma.'" Reed couldn't speak. "So when I say you gave us permission to fight back, I mean you completed what my daughter started. She tried to get Emily to safety. She didn't make it. But you did. You finished what Sarah couldn't." Reed stood in his dark kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, eyes burning. He'd held men dying in the sand in Fallujah. He'd made calls no officer should have to make. He'd buried friends. He'd walked through things that most people only see in movies. Nothing had ever hit him like this. "I'm going to hang up now, Maggie. Not because I want to, because if I don't, I'm going to say something that sounds like a promise, and I don't make promises I can't keep. You've already kept every promise you've made. Good night, Maggie." "Good night, Reed." He set the phone down. He put both hands flat on the kitchen counter. He stood there for a full minute without moving. Then he called Linda. "I need that accident report. I need the vehicle inspection. I need the forensic analysis on those brake lines. Whatever it costs, whatever it takes, however many investigators you have to hire. I need to know what happened to Sarah Parker. Not for the court, not for the case. For a 6-year-old girl who's going to grow up one day and ask how her mother really died." "Reed, the investigation is already underway. My guy is good. He's thorough. Tell him to be faster. I'll call him tonight." Reed hung up. He walked to his bedroom. He sat on the edge of the bed. For the first time in 4 months, he didn't sit there calculating shift schedules or reviewing security protocols or planning the next move. He sat there thinking about a woman named Sarah who he'd never met. A second-grade teacher who sang to her daughter in the car. A woman who tried 3 times to leave and was pulled back every time. A mother who shielded her child with her body at 65 miles per hour on a wet road. A woman whose courage lived on in the smallest, bravest person Reed had ever known. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Emily had given it to him 2 weeks ago, a drawing in crayon. 8 motorcycles in a circle. A grandmother in the middle. A little girl holding a rabbit with one ear. At the bottom, in crooked 6-year-old handwriting, it said, "My family." She'd spelled it wrong. Reed held that drawing in his rough, scarred hands and let it mean everything. The forensic report from Linda Faye Robertson's investigator landed on Reed's kitchen table at 6:15 on a Tuesday morning, and everything they thought they knew about Sarah Parker's death collapsed. Reed read it twice, then he called Linda. "Tell me I'm reading this right." "You are. The brake lines on Sarah's car showed scoring consistent with mechanical tampering, not wear. The original investigation missed it because the vehicle was processed at a county shop that handles maybe 2 fatality inspections a year. My guy is a former NTSB investigator. He's testifying. Caleb did this. The evidence is circumstantial at this stage, But combined with the pattern of abuse, the threats, the escalation, a jury is going to connect those dots. Reed's hand was flat on the table. His fingers were pressing so hard into the wood that the tips went white. Does Maggie know? I'm telling her today. And Reed, I need you there when I do, because this woman is about to find out that the man who terrorized her family may have murdered her daughter. She's going to need someone she trusts standing in that room. Reed closed his eyes. He thought about Emily sleeping on the couch with Captain. He thought about Maggie rocking in that chair, bruised and bleeding, saying her daughter knew every curve of that road blindfolded. I'll be there. They sat at Maggie's kitchen table at 10 o'clock. Emily was at school, the first full week she'd attended since the diner incident, thanks to Flip driving her every morning and picking her up every afternoon on his motorcycle, which Emily had secretly started to love. Linda placed the report on the table. She didn't soften it. She didn't wrap it in legal language. She looked Maggie in the eyes and told her the truth. Our investigator found evidence that your daughter's brake lines were tampered with. The damage was not consistent with normal wear or road conditions. It's consistent with deliberate scoring. Someone cutting into the lines enough that they'd fail under pressure, but not enough to be obvious. Maggie didn't move. She didn't blink. She sat completely still in that kitchen chair, while the world she'd built around her grief rearranged itself into something darker and more terrible than anything she'd imagined. He killed her, Maggie said, not a question. We believe so. He killed my baby. Maggie. He killed my Sarah, and then he showed up to the funeral. He cried at her grave. He held Emily on his hip and told everyone what a tragedy it was. Maggie's voice was rising, not to a scream, to something worse, a low, shaking fury that came from a place so deep it had no bottom. He stood in my house afterward and ate the food people brought and told me he'd help raise Emily. He looked me in my face and... She stopped. Her mouth stayed open, but no sound came out. Then she put both hands over her face and broke. Reed reached across the table and put his hand on her arm. He didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. He just held on and let her fall apart. Linda waited. She'd done this before, sat across the table from women learning that the worst thing they suspected was actually true. It never got easier. It shouldn't get easier. When Maggie's breathing slowed, Linda spoke again. I've already contacted the district attorney and the FBI field office in Oklahoma City. The original accident investigation is being reopened. Combined with the domestic violence charges, the stalking, the arson attempt, and now this, Caleb Turner is looking at federal charges that will put him away for the rest of his life. I want him to know, Maggie said. Her hands came down from her face. Her eyes were swollen and red, but her jaw was set. I want him to know that we found out. I want him to sit in that cell and know that every lie he told is finished. He'll know. At trial, he'll hear every word. That's not enough. Maggie's voice hardened. I want to look at him when they say it. I want to be in that courtroom when they tell the world what he did to my daughter. Linda nodded. You will be. Reed drove to Tiny's shop that afternoon and sat in the back room alone for 20 minutes. He didn't call anyone. He didn't punch a wall. He sat in the chair where they held church, and he breathed. Then Preacher walked in. Heard about the report, Preacher said. Yeah. How's Maggie? Broken, but standing. Preacher sat down across from him. And you? Reed looked at his hands, the same hands that had dropped Caleb in that parking lot with a single controlled strike. The same hands that had picked Emily up when she'd fallen asleep on Maggie's porch one evening and carried her to bed. I keep thinking about what would have happened if Emily hadn't run into that diner, if she'd gone somewhere else, if she'd been too scared to ask for help. But she did. She did. And now we know her mother was murdered, Preacher. Murdered. And for 4 years that man walked free. He went to parent-teacher conferences. He filed custody motions. He sent birthday cards to the daughter of the woman he killed. Preacher was quiet for a moment. What do you need? I need every member at the trial. Full colors, front row. I want that jury to see the community that stood up for this family. Not as intimidation, as testimony. 12 citizens looking at 12 more and understanding that this town chose a side. Done. And I need something else. I need you to talk to Emily's therapist, Dr. Nakamura. She's going to need to prepare Emily for the possibility that this trial goes public. Media, cameras, people wanting to talk to the little girl who ran to the bikers. Emily's not a symbol. She's a kid. We protect her from that too. I'll call today. The trial date was set for October 14th. The leaves hadn't turned yet, but the air carried something different. A tension that settled over the town like a low-pressure system that wouldn't break. Martin Kessler, Caleb's attorney, filed motion after motion. Suppressed the jail recording, dismissed the arson charge, challenged the forensic report on the brake lines, exclude the Iron Wolves' testimony as prejudicial. Judge Patricia Moreno denied every single one. Kessler switched tactics. He leaked to the local press that the Iron Wolves were a gang with ties to organized crime. A story ran in the county paper with the headline, "Biker Club's involvement in custody case raises questions." Linda responded within 24 hours. She provided the paper with Reed's military service record, the club's charity history, letters of support from Sheriff Harper, the Children's Hospital, 3 churches, and the local Veterans Association. She included photographs of the Iron Wolves at every community event they'd participated in over 8 years. The paper ran a correction. Then they ran a feature. The headline read, "The Men Who Answered When a Little Girl Called for Help." Kessler's strategy collapsed. But Caleb had one more card to play. 3 days before the trial, Reed got a call from Sheriff Harper. "We intercepted a letter Caleb tried to smuggle out through another inmate. It was addressed to his cousin, Darren Turner, in Tulsa." What did it say? Instructions. Detailed instructions on how to break into Maggie's apartment and take Emily. Reed felt the blood drain from his face. Is the cousin in custody? Tulsa PD picked him up an hour ago. He had a bag packed, a map to Maggie's building, a prepaid phone with Caleb's smuggled instructions saved on it. My God. Reed, listen to me. This is federal now. The FBI is taking over the kidnapping conspiracy charge. Caleb Turner is finished. But I need your men to stay sharp through the trial. 3 more days. We haven't left her side in 4 months, Sheriff. We're not leaving now. The morning of October 14th, Maggie Parker put on the same black dress she'd worn to her daughter's funeral. She buttoned it slowly. Her hands barely shook. Emily was staying with Donna Whitfield and her husband. Coyote and Flip were parked outside their house. 2 men, 2 phones, 2 sets of eyes. Reed picked Maggie up at 8 o'clock. She walked to his truck and stopped. "I'm scared," she said. "I know. Not of him, not anymore. I'm scared I'll see his face and I won't be able to speak. I'm scared I'll freeze like I did on the phone, like I did in that parking lot, like I did for 4 years." Reed looked at her. "Maggie, you raised your granddaughter alone after losing your daughter. You survived a man who tried to destroy you. You sat at your kitchen table and told a lawyer the hardest truth of your life. You have never frozen. You've been fighting in silence, and today you fight out loud." She took a breath. Then she got in the truck. The courtroom was full. Every seat, standing room along the back wall. 12 members of the Iron Wolves sat in the front row behind the prosecution. Full colors, cleaned and pressed, not a sound. When Caleb was brought in, he scanned the gallery. His eyes found Reed first, then Maggie, then the row of leather vests. Something in his face changed. The arrogance, the smirk, the coiled rage, it all flickered. For the first time since anyone had known him, Caleb Turner looked afraid. The trial lasted 3 days. Day 1, the assault. Sheriff Harper's testimony, the paramedics' photos. Donna Whitfield describing a barefoot child screaming for help. Reed's calm, precise account of what he found in that parking lot. Day 2, the stalking, the protective order violations. The jail recording played for the jury. Caleb's voice filling the courtroom with threats. Patricia Turner in the gallery, stone-faced, arms crossed. Kessler objecting every 4 minutes. Moreno overruling every time. Day 3, the murder. Linda Faye Robertson's forensic investigator took the stand. He walked the jury through the break line analysis with photographs, diagrams, and 30 years of expertise. He explained scoring patterns. He explained failure thresholds. He explained that in his professional opinion, the damage to Sarah Parker's vehicle was not accidental. Kessler cross-examined for 2 hours. He challenged methodology. He challenged credentials. He attacked every assumption. The investigator didn't waver. Not once. Then Linda called her final witness, Margaret Parker. Maggie walked to the stand. She sat down. She placed her hands flat on the wooden rail. She looked at the jury, 12 ordinary people from an ordinary town, who were about to hear an extraordinary truth. My daughter Sarah was 29 years old when she died. She was a teacher. She taught 2nd grade. She loved her students, her daughter, and her mother. She was kind, and she was strong, and she was afraid. Afraid of what, Mrs. Parker? Linda asked. Afraid of the man sitting at that table. Maggie pointed directly at Caleb. Her hand did not shake. She tried to leave him 3 times. 3 times he found her. He broke her phone. He drained their bank account. He told her that if she left, she'd never see Emily again. Did your daughter tell you she feared for her life? The last time I spoke to her, 2 days before the accident, she called me from a gas station bathroom. She was whispering. She said, Mom, if anything happens to me, take Emily. Don't let him have her. Promise me. I promised her. I've been keeping that promise every day since. The courtroom was silent. Not courthouse quiet, silent. The kind of silence that holds its breath. The day she died, she was driving to my house. She was bringing Emily to me. She'd finally made the decision to leave for good, and her brakes failed on a road she'd driven 1,000 times. Maggie looked directly at Caleb. You took my daughter. You tried to take my granddaughter. You tried to take me, but you failed. Because a 6-year-old girl was braver than you have ever been in your entire life. She asked for help, and people answered. Caleb's attorney objected. Moreno overruled. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and 17 minutes. Guilty. On every count, domestic assault, stalking, violation of protective orders, attempted arson, conspiracy to kidnap, and vehicular homicide in the death of Sarah Parker. When the foreman read the last verdict, Maggie covered her mouth with both hands. Linda put an arm around her. Behind them, 12 men in leather vests sat perfectly still. Reed didn't move. He didn't celebrate. He watched Caleb Turner being led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, head down, shoulders caved, and he felt nothing that resembled victory. Only weight. The weight of a dead woman who should have been sitting in this courtroom herself. The weight of a child who would grow up without her mother. The weight of 4 years that could never be returned. Outside the courthouse, Maggie stood on the steps in the October air. The iron wolves formed a half circle around her, not guarding her now, just standing with her. Reed approached. How do you feel? Maggie looked at him with eyes that held 4 years of grief, 4 months of war, and something new that she was still learning to recognize. I feel like I can finally tell Sarah she's safe. Reed nodded. And I feel like I need to see my granddaughter. Flip had already called Donna. By the time Maggie reached the Whitfield house, Emily was standing on the porch with Captain in her arms. She saw her grandmother's face. She saw something had changed. Grandma, is it over? Maggie knelt down on the porch. Her knees ached. Her back hurt. Her stitches were long gone, but the scar above her eye would be there forever. It's over, baby. Emily walked into her arms slowly, not running this time, not desperate, slowly, like she finally had the time. "Is my mom okay now?" Emily whispered. Maggie held her tighter. "Yeah, baby, your mom is okay now." Behind them, Reed sat on his motorcycle at the curb, engine off, helmet in his lap. He watched the grandmother and the child hold each other on that porch, and he let himself feel something he hadn't allowed in months. Relief. But underneath it, already forming, already taking shape, the question that would define everything that came next. If this happened to Maggie and Emily in a town with 8 bikers who gave a damn, what was happening right now to the families who had no one? That question kept Reed awake for 3 straight nights after the verdict. He sat at Tiny's shop on a Friday evening, the back room empty except for him and Preacher, and he said it out loud for the first time. "We got lucky." Preacher looked up from his coffee. "Lucky? We spent 4 months sleeping in trucks and standing guard in the rain. That ain't luck, brother. Lucky that Emily ran into our diner. Lucky that she picked us. What about the next Maggie, the next Emily? What about the 70-year-old woman in some town 200 miles from here, whose son-in-law is kicking her door in right now, and there's nobody, not one person, standing between her and whatever comes next?" Preacher set his cup down. "You're talking about something bigger than one family. I'm talking about building something, a system, a network, something that exists whether or not a scared little girl happens to stumble into the right room at the right time." Reed, we're 12 guys with motorcycles and day jobs. We were 8 guys with motorcycles and day jobs 4 months ago. Now we're 12. Coyote's cousin in Tulsa called last week, wanting to know how to start a chapter. Duke's got contacts in 3 other clubs across Oklahoma and Arkansas. Sheriff Harper told me the state attorney general's office has been asking about what we did. Preacher leaned back. "You want to turn this into a program?" "I want to make sure no grandmother dies alone because nobody answered the phone." The next week, Reed called a meeting. Not just the Iron Wolves. He invited Sheriff Harper. He invited Linda Faye Roberson. He invited Donna Whitfield. He invited Dr. Nakamura, Emily's therapist. He invited Pastor Jim Beckett from the Methodist Church on Main Street, who'd been quietly providing meals to abuse survivors for 15 years without ever asking for credit. They sat in a circle at the community center, the same room where the town held 4th of July planning meetings and high school basketball banquets. Reed stood up. He wasn't comfortable with speeches, never had been, but he'd learned something from Maggie Parker. Sometimes you fight out loud. 4 months ago, a child ran into a diner and asked 8 strangers for help. We said yes. What happened after that, the protection, the legal fight, the trial, the conviction, that worked. But it only worked because of the people in this room. Law enforcement, legal advocates, therapists, community members, and yes, a bunch of guys on motorcycles who decided they weren't going to look the other way. He paused. "I don't want this to be a one-time thing. I want to build something that lasts. An elder protection initiative. A rapid response network for seniors and grandparents facing domestic violence. Trained volunteers. Legal resources. Emergency relocation. Court escorts. All of it coordinated with law enforcement. All of it legal. All of it documented." Sheriff Harper spoke first. "I've been in law enforcement for 27 years. I've never seen civilian protection work this effectively alongside my department. I'm in." Linda leaned forward. "I'll provide pro bono legal consultation for the first year and train volunteer advocates on protective order procedures." Dr. Nakamura raised her hand. "The trauma component is critical. Most programs forget that safety isn't just physical. I'll develop a therapeutic response protocol for children and elderly survivors." Pastor Beckett nodded. "My congregation has been doing this work in pieces for years. Meals, shelter, transportation. We just never had a structure to connect it all. You're offering the structure." Donna Whitfield, who'd held Emily behind that diner counter on the worst morning of that child's life, stood up last. "I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a therapist. I'm a waitress. But I can tell you that what happened in my diner changed this town. People talk about it. People feel it. And if a waitress from Route 66 can be part of something that makes sure no more grandmothers get beaten in parking lots while the world looks away, then you tell me where to sign. The Iron Wolves Elder Protection Initiative launched 6 weeks later. Reed didn't expect what happened next. A reporter from the Oklahoma City NBC affiliate picked up the story. She'd been covering the Caleb Turner trial and had followed the thread back to the diner, to Emily, to Maggie, to the club. She requested an interview with Reed. He said no 3 times. The 4th time, Maggie called him. "Do the interview." "Maggie, I don't want cameras in our business." "This isn't about our business anymore. This is about every family like ours that doesn't know help exists. You told me you wanted to build something bigger. Bigger means people have to see it." Reed did the interview. He wore his vest. He didn't smile for the camera. He talked for 40 minutes about what happened, what they built, and why it mattered. The segment aired on a Thursday night. By Friday morning, it had been picked up by 3 national outlets. By Sunday, Reed's phone had 67 messages from motorcycle clubs, veterans organizations, churches, and senior advocacy groups across 11 states asking the same question. How do we do what you did? Coyote walked into Tiny's shop that Monday and dropped a stack of printed emails on the table. "This one's from a club in Phoenix. They've already got 8 guys ready to train. This one's from a VFW post in Georgia. They want to partner with local riders. And this one," he held up a single sheet, "this one's from a grandmother in Nebraska. She's 73. Her grandson-in-law has been threatening her for 2 years. She saw the story. She wrote, 'I didn't know anyone cared about old women like me. Now I know someone does.'" Reed read the letter. Then he read it again. Then he folded it and put it in his vest pocket. "We're going to need a bigger table," Tiny said from the doorway. Within a year, the Iron Wolves model had been replicated in 14 states. Reed traveled to 9 of them personally, training local chapters on the protocols they developed, communication with law enforcement, documentation procedures, legal coordination, therapeutic referral systems, and the one rule that governed everything: no vigilante action, no exceptions, no matter how angry you get. "The moment we cross that line," Reed told every group, "we become the thing we're fighting against. Our power is discipline. Our weapon is presence. We show up. We stand visible. We document everything. And we let the system work, but we make damn sure the system knows we're watching." Maggie became the initiative's most powerful voice. She spoke at community centers, churches, courthouses, and eventually at the state capitol. A 68-year-old grandmother with a scar above her eye and a voice that could silence a room full of legislators. "You fund police departments," she told the Oklahoma State Assembly. "You fund prisons. You fund courts. But you don't fund the people who stand in the gap between a threat and a victim. I'm alive today because 12 men on motorcycles decided my life was worth protecting. How many grandmothers in this state don't have 12 men? How many are waiting right now for someone to answer?" The Assembly passed an elder protection funding bill 4 months later. They called it the Sarah Parker Act. Maggie cried when she heard the name. Not the broken crying from her kitchen table. Not the desperate crying from the courthouse steps. This was different. This was the kind of crying that comes when grief finally finds its purpose. Emily grew, the way children do when the ground beneath them stops shaking. She started 2nd grade, the same grade her mother had taught. She raised her hand in class. She made friends. She slept through the night. The first time she slept a full 8 hours without waking up screaming, Maggie called Reed at 6 in the morning. She slept, Reed, the whole night. No nightmares, no waking up, no asking if he's here. Reed was sitting on his porch. He held the phone against his ear and closed his eyes. "That's the best news I've heard in a year, Maggie. Dr. Nakamura says she's making remarkable progress. She's talking about her mom now, not just the scary parts, the good parts. She told me yesterday that she remembers Sarah singing in the car. She remembers the song. What song? You Are My Sunshine. She said her mom used to change the words to, You are my Emily, my only Emily. Reed pressed his thumb and forefinger against his eyes. 44 years old, 2 combat tours, a lifetime of controlled emotions, and a dead woman's lullaby nearly broke him over the phone on a Tuesday morning. She's going to be okay, Maggie. She already is. At 8 years old, Emily wrote an essay for school titled, My Family. Her teacher, Mrs. Donovan, expected the usual: parents, siblings, pets. What she got was something else entirely. Emily wrote about Maggie, about Captain the one-eared rabbit, about Donna at the diner, about Coyote and his breakfast tacos, about Flip, who let her wear his helmet on the ride to school, about Preacher, who told her stories about traveling the country on his motorcycle and always ended with, and that's why you stay in school, and about Reed. She wrote about Reed last. Reed doesn't talk a lot, but when he talks, everyone listens. He came to my grandma's house the night everything was scary and he said, not anymore. And he was right. He's not my dad. He's not trying to be, but he's the person who showed up when I was the most scared I've ever been, and he never left. Mrs. Donovan submitted the essay to a statewide writing competition. Emily won first place. At the awards ceremony, Emily stood at a podium that was almost taller than she was and read her essay to a room full of strangers. Maggie sat in the second row, holding a tissue she'd already used up. Reed sat beside her, wearing a clean shirt under his leather vest, his hands clasped between his knees. When Emily finished reading, the room gave her a standing ovation. She looked out at the audience, found Reed, and smiled. Not the desperate, terrified look she'd given him in the diner 2 years ago. A real smile. A kid's smile. The kind that says, I'm okay now. Reed smiled back, small, barely visible, but Maggie saw it, and she put her hand on his arm and squeezed. Years passed. The Iron Wolves Elder Protection Initiative became a national model studied by universities, referenced by legislators, and funded by grants that Reed never imagined possible. What started in the back room of Tiny's auto shop became a network spanning 26 states with over 400 trained volunteers. Caleb Turner received 47 years, no parole. The vehicular homicide conviction ensured he would never walk free again. Patricia Turner's custody petition was dismissed with prejudice. She never contacted Maggie or Emily again. Maggie turned 72 and still spoke at every event she was invited to. She told the same story every time, not because she'd forgotten the details, but because the details mattered. Every time she said her daughter's name out loud, Sarah lived again for a moment. Emily grew into a teenager who carried herself with a quiet confidence that her teachers noticed and her classmates respected. She wasn't loud. She wasn't flashy. She was steady. Like someone who'd learned very young that the world could crack open beneath your feet. And the thing that saves you isn't luck. It's the people willing to stand on the broken ground beside you. At her high school graduation, Emily Parker stood at the podium as valedictorian. Maggie was in the front row, silver-haired, straight-backed, scar still visible above her left eye. Reed sat beside her, older now, more gray than brown, quieter if that was possible. Preacher sat next to him, 73, reading glasses hanging from his neck, wiping his eyes before she even started speaking. Emily looked out at the audience. She didn't use notes. When I was 6 years old, I ran into a diner because I didn't know what else to do. My grandmother was being hurt. I was barefoot and scared, and I didn't have a plan. I just knew I needed help. She paused. I ran past every adult in that room, and I grabbed the vest of a man I'd never met. I don't know why I chose him. Maybe because he was big. Maybe because he looked strong. Or maybe because when you're a child and the world is falling apart, you don't think, you just move toward the thing that feels like it might hold. Her voice was steady, but her eyes glistened. That man and his brothers didn't hesitate. They stood up. They walked outside. They stopped what was happening. And then they did something that changed my life. They stayed. They didn't help once and disappear. They stayed for months, for years. They protected my grandmother. They helped put a dangerous man in prison. They helped prove that my mother didn't die in an accident. She took a breath. I've been asked 100 times what that moment taught me. People expect me to say something about courage or strength or bravery, but that's not what I learned. She looked directly at Reed. I learned that family isn't just who you're born to. It's who stands up when you cry for help. It's the stranger who kneels down and says, "I'm here." It's the mechanic who brings breakfast tacos when you won't come out of the bathtub. It's the waitress who holds you behind a counter. It's the lawyer who drives 4 hours because a child needs to be safe. It's the pastor, the therapist, the sheriff, and the 12 men on motorcycles who decided that one grandmother and one little girl were worth fighting for. Tears ran down her face. She didn't wipe them. My mother's name was Sarah. She was a teacher. She loved singing in the car. She was brave enough to try to leave, and the world failed her. But it didn't fail me. Because of the people in this room, because of the people who built something out of the worst day of my life, it didn't fail me. She gripped the edges of the podium. To everyone out there who feels alone, who feels like nobody sees them, who feels like the system forgot them, run. Run toward help. Run toward the scariest door, the most unlikely room, the people you think would never listen. Because you might be wrong. You might open that door and find 8 strangers who will change your life forever. She stepped back from the podium. The auditorium erupted. Maggie was standing before she knew she was standing, hands pressed against her heart, tears streaming down her face. Preacher had given up on dignity and was openly sobbing into a bandana. Coyote had his arm around his wife, both of them wrecked. Donna Whitfield clutched her husband's hand from the 5th row and whispered, "That's our girl." Reed sat still. His hands were clasped. His jaw was tight. His eyes were locked on Emily. She looked back at him and mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Reed nodded once. Then he looked down at his hands and let the tears come. Quietly, the way a man does when he's held everything together for everyone else and finally, just for a moment, lets someone hold him. After the ceremony, Emily found him in the parking lot. He was leaning against his motorcycle, helmet in his hands, staring at nothing. She walked up and stood beside him. "You okay?" He laughed, a short, rough sound. "I'm supposed to ask you that." "I'm good, Reed, really good." He looked at her, 18 years old, brown-haired, clear-eyed, standing in a graduation gown with the confidence of someone who'd walked through fire before she lost her first tooth. "Your mom would be proud of you." "I know, Grandma tells me every day." She paused. "But I think she'd be proud of you too." Reed didn't trust himself to speak. He just put his hand on her shoulder the same way he had 12 years ago, in a diner when she was 6 and terrified and the world was ending. She hugged him, hard, the way she'd grabbed his vest that morning, like he was the last solid thing in a spinning world. But this time she wasn't holding on out of fear. She was holding on out of love. Emily Parker walked back across the parking lot toward her grandmother, her friends, her life. She was laughing, free, whole. Reed watched her go. He put on his helmet. He started his engine. 12 years ago, a barefoot little girl in a torn dress ran into a roadside diner and changed 8 men's lives forever. She didn't know she was starting a revolution. She didn't know she was saving her grandmother. She didn't know she was building a family. She just knew she needed help. And 8 strangers stood up. Because the most powerful thing in this world isn't size or strength or leather or chrome. It's a child brave enough to ask and adults brave enough to answer.